Hey all. So, we are finally back in a season of Alliance War. All of these fights that we take actually kind of matter again. And I, for one, am really excited to be back. I do not feel that the game is fixed, as many of you can surely tell. I actually feel like my gameplay got worse after the hotfix. Dex is still kind of unreliable, and parry seems to have gotten a little worse for me. But, you know, engine updates are something that just has to happen, and I don't fully blame Kabam for this one, and I know that they're really working on it because this isn't fun for them either. So, to get to the actual fights, because the challenge of war, of taking in as best as you can the right champion for the job and executing against a good defense is really one of the things that keeps me in this game. And we do have one of those here. Because this Mangog right here on this first node is a really interesting placement. Because what a lot of people do for Mangog is try to power control him so that he just never goes into his enrage mode, because then he'll go unblockable and unstoppable unless you hit him with a special, and it can be kind of difficult to wind up or to line up right. So often the counter for him is simply magic. And I have used Mr. Fantastic on him in the past, but what I normally do with Reed is I lock it down the same way I would with magic. I push to the L2s, I stack those pre-fight debuffs, and I completely turn him off. But if I did that here on strike counter, I would run out of those counters, and he would just end up stacking tons and tons of Furies, and he would eventually be able to just one-shot me through my block. So I'm going to have to change things up a little bit. I did some duels, and between Mystic Dispersion and just the way the AI is passive sometimes, I decided I very much do still want Petrify on, because I want his passive power gain and any he gets from Mystic Dispersion to be at least a little bit under control, even though I don't expect to be able to stack those. I'm also throwing on Debuff Siphoner, not because it's really going to help me, but because it's one more debuff, and therefore it'll be a little bit of extra attack for Reed, and a slightly higher chance to evade. We are going to make sure we land our heavy in every cycle, because that's what's going, because that's just part of playing the node, right? However, what we really need to make sure we do is keep the L1, make sure we throw it as soon as we get it, pretty much, both to avoid running out of strike counters and to make sure that we throw it and reset the strike counters before he throws his special and triggers power struggle and drains our power. Now, this would eventually just get away from us with another champion, because every time he throws a special one, he gains 2 rage stacks or hatred stacks and starts to, get into the danger zone. But Reed has a stagger on his special one. And so those pre-fights aren't even really the important part. The important part is that when we throw that special one, notice here I'm blocking to try and make sure he doesn't throw it. I know that he's going to dodge that first hit, but in my duels, I found that he reliably came back in and got nailed by the second part of the L1. And so, even if I don't hit him, I know that I'm landing that stagger. Like I was saying earlier, that's the important part. Because that was what got rid of both his unstoppable and his unblockable right away. And after that, he hasn't gained a single Fury this whole fight. We've dodged a ton of specials. We have that Careful Study passive up. Not that it's doing a whole lot for us, but it is making us hit harder. And it means that if I did get hit by one of his special ones, it wouldn't do much damage. But really, Reed is doing enough damage to him that we only needed to stagger one cycle of that. And so as long as we stay on top of our L1s, what could have been an extremely dangerous placement for somebody else really felt pretty easy to me. So onto this Killmonger versus iHulk. iHulk is a very popular placement here. We put him here quite a bit because eventually he will go unblockable before he regens, right? And it can be really tempting to try and hit him during that time. And if you mess up and he's gained any furies throughout, just from the way the node works, it's going to hurt. So, in my experience, where people normally go wrong is by trying to blitz this node down as quickly as possible to just try and avoid the node, and they ignore it and they let the Furies build. And that gets dangerous quickly because he can really hit hard. What you want to do is you want to use somebody who has at least some bleed damage, like Killmonger or Nick Fury, to mitigate how much gamma he's gaining. And like Nick can stop him from healing at all. Killmonger doesn't have that, but Killmonger does have, armor, crit resistance, true strike, and other tools. And he works a lot better for my path later on. So even though he won't turn the healing off completely, he'll take it down to almost nothing. And crucially, he won't be giving him a ton of extra gamma via degen the way that some other popular options for this lane will. Notice how he's almost down and he still hasn't hit 15 gamma yet. If you were particularly lucky with your crits, you could take him down before he hits 15 gamma and stop the healing altogether. Notice how through all of this, it's pretty difficult to stop him from gaining any Furies at all, but we've kept it all the way down to 3, and Killmonger has good enough block proficiency that we can deal with that. So we took some brute force there, but because we'd taken basically no damage up until then, it really didn't matter. That's like a potion. We'll deal with that later. Because we just played the node, landed our heavy, landed our medium, light, 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 medium, and then, parried to build a little power, quickly through the L1, just play the node, and stay out of his way when he's unblockable. It's really a fairly simple fight. Now next up we have this Longshot. If you are a returning viewer to the channel, first off, thank you, I appreciate it. But second, you've probably seen me take Power Snack now with Reed a few times, and honestly, Longshot is just even easier than Doom and some of the other options. This is a pretty hard counter. Reed starts off not reversing it or totally shutting it down, but mitigating it enough that he can then play around it long enough to get it fully under control, and once he gets that first L2 off, it's game over, basically. Now, I do miss that first parry. Like I said, it isn't feeling great. And it looks like this guy's running max limber, so we are going to have to be on top of our heavies, make sure we really get them in there. However, I am also running max petrify, the mastery, and so notice that with suppression there, I got to my first bar of power before he got to his. And even with Power Snack there, he gained barely anything. And now we got our special 2 off and stacked those debuffs when he's only gotten off a single special of his own. Now I was dodging to try and get him to throw that special 1, but it's better to trigger Power Snack because it will do almost nothing, and land that heavy to pause the debuffs than to keep baiting. And that's one of the reasons that I like Reed so much for this, is because he counters the aspects of the node that make it most dangerous. You can actually stay more aggressive, the way that other champions might not be able to, where they're like, well, if he had just thrown his special, then I would have been able to get back to my game plan, it would have been easy. Reed almost immediately makes it so that, well, I was going to let him throw his special if it worked out, And if it didn't, I would just keep hitting him in the face and I was going to win anyway. And that's just a really freeing feeling for me here, is just how easy he makes this node. Now notice there I switched to special ones because my purpose here is this fight is fully won. I just want to finish with as many unique debuffs as possible. I got even the stun there so that I get as many charges as possible going forward. I don't believe I was planning on using Reed again at all, so I wanted all of those pre-fights to place for other people to make their lives easier. And notice I was up to 9 when I clicked forward to that Korg. Now this invisible woman is on path 4B, where she can go unblockable. Normally I would want to send someone like Elsa Bloodstone here, or maybe Killmonger with the Void synergy, or somebody like Mole Man. Somebody who would reliably purify those debuffs and therefore get rid of the unblockable and just be able to continue hitting into her. That just did not work with our planning this time, but that's okay, because as I've shown before, if you use Killmonger or anybody else with solid light attacks and just use step back intercepts, or as some people call them, side steps, then it's very easy to find openings on Invisible Woman. Now, that said, if either you are a little bit rusty, which maybe I am coming out of a long off season, and or the game's controls are not working exactly the way you expect them for some unspecified reason, you might get hit once or twice like I did at the opening there. However, all of these debuffs that she's placing on us while she has her barrier up, those were all giving us power, and so it was easy to build up to our first special 2 and throw it. Now, it was important to try and get that special 2 off before she threw a special, because Killmonger can continue to gain counterpunch charges while he's armor broken, but he cannot gain any more indestructibles. So that one right there is kind of the last one I have. So I'm being really careful because she has been unblockable almost this entire fight. But if I'm careful with my step backs, I'm usually in pretty good shape. That dex just didn't work for me. It is what it is. Maybe I was late. Maybe it's the state of parry right now. Not really a big deal. Killmonger has very high crit resistance, so as much as those two hurt, I know I'm still plenty safe. If I can manage to get this heal block off and... nope, her barrier's down. I was hoping for some willpower there, but that's okay. However, we do manage to get another special 2 off without the armor breakup, so we have some extra indestructibles in the back. I did get hit and lose some health here, but it's worth pointing out that Killmonger basically doubled the indestructible boost that I used, and so I had 6 free hits instead of 3, and I had up to 9 by the end there. Quite a bit of extra breathing room against somebody who is just unblockable almost the whole fight, and I feel like that was a pretty good option because another one didn't really work. Now this Havok I've taken before. It's a fairly simple fight. Basically, you just want to parry him as much as possible, because every time you parry him, you are going to power drain him because his first medium is a projectile, and that is going to remove all of his plasma charges, and therefore he won't place any plasma buildups on you. And therefore, even if you lose your armor due to the Crumbling armor node, there is nothing to worry about because he can't possibly detonate. Super simple, right? Also, because he won't place those plasma buildups on you, he'll never go unblockable. Unless you decide to be a massive idiot the way that I was in this. So I throw on a debuff siphoner. I think that was just in case he landed a heavy on me. And I throw on petrification, I believe, is the other one. I think I was going back and forth. Do I want to cut down on his passive power gain or on the power gain he gets from hitting? So yeah, I went for petrification because I prefer the landed hits to be more predictable in a fight like this. Um, but I want to cut down on the amount of power he gains while I'm just baiting or doing something else, right? I throw on my tech power boosts because once I throw an L2, I want to be close to another one. I didn't bother with a power start, which makes this extremely easy, but last time I took this, it was just such a wipeout that I figured that wasn't necessary. However, pretty quickly here, you will see me do that. And I completely forgot. I was like, well, why am I not heavying him? That's helpful, right? Because the bleed does a lot of damage and I have debuff siphoner. As you can see, I already have a plasma buildup, and that's because even though I'm keeping, or I was keeping control of his plasma charges, when you bleed Havok, he puts a plasma buildup on you automatically. And so he would not have gone unblockable this entire fight if I played it the way that I outlined, not using heavies, just parrying, baiting heavies, and countering with combos until special 2s. He wouldn't have been unblockable even once. But because of that permanent heal block, he is never not going to be unblockable for the rest of this fight. And that's just something I have to deal with. So I'm going to try and keep that armor up. I am going to lose it a couple times, and he is building plasmas. I mean, I am a little bit in danger of detonating here. You see right there, it comes back not quite just in time, because thankfully this Havok is running willpower, and so as soon as I placed those armor breaks on him, willpower tried to heal, and so he started power draining and he lost his plasma charges, which is why Warlock is such a great option there anyway. But if he hadn't been running willpower, then throwing that special 2 probably would have caused him to detonate before I got my armor back, and that probably would have been a death. And that would have just been a completely unforced error, because like I said, if you end up assigned that fight, just don't heavy. I don't know, man. At least all it cost was potions, right? First war back. It's a good assignment. I just made a mistake of it. So now we go into the Spider Ham. Now, I've taken him on Ebb-and-Flow Intercept before, and there is an interaction between his spider nonsense and the protection node, such that if his spider nonsense is above a certain point and he has the protection up, he will take no damage at all from specials. So that can make this a longer fight. However, because Killmonger has access to counterpunch, he has access to very easy and safe intercepts, and as long as we rely on that, we'll be doing plenty of damage just from combos. So when I first started using Killmonger against Spider-Ham, the biggest issue I was having was that I was getting backed up. Because here he throws a special 1 easily, and you just counter it. You get True Strike, no problem. See, there's where I was talking about easy intercepts via the counterpunch. Just did a ton of damage. However, sometimes you can get backed up by Spider-Ham, and if that starts to happen, one thing that you'll see me doing here is I just keep hitting into his block as soon as he has a bar of power, because that helps keep him aggressive. It also helps keep him backed up, so you don't end up dodging those cartoon hammer heavies at the wall. Which is not my favorite thing to do. Look how little damage that special did. It was still worth throwing, in my opinion, because it gave us those indestructible charges, and that gives us some extra space, but it didn't really do any damage. So see right here, he's refusing to throw that special 1, but this is actually, I talked about this in my guide to Killmonger, this is one of my favorite things about him. As much as I love somebody like Odin or other True Strike champions, the way a lot of abilities that activate off of an attacker's specials end up working is that the defender will just bait them out, and then now you're kind of up shit creek. But with Killmonger, you just keep baiting out the opponent's special, the True Strike will expire, but then you just counter their special and you get it back. Like, who cares that you waited? Who cares that it expired? Now you have it again. And that just makes him so much more reliable for me. So there you go. Pretty quick fight, very safe, even without specials. I knew that I was going to be driving in the morning, which is actually why this war video and the other one from this weekend are late. I went on a little trip, and so luckily I didn't end up having to take any minis. We did not end up winning this war. BG3 did pretty well, but, you know, it was the first war after a very long off-season that followed a short season that followed a long off-season, and we just had a few more marks of rust than the other team. That's the way it is. We're going to move on and move forward from there. Hopefully you found this interesting. I was certainly engaged by these fights. It is good to have war back. Hope y'all's season started off on a good note. And if you found this helpful, if you found this entertaining, please pass it along. I appreciate that. Consider liking and subscribing, and I will catch y'all next time. Take care.